The internet is cracked, the show that asks the question, can we coexist with our creation?
Hello, my name is Seth Camillo.
And I am Caroline Risberg, and we are The Internet is Cracked by Addicts for Addicts.
We are so lucky to have Dr. Michael Zimmer with us today. He is a highly regarded privacy and data ethics scholar, serving as a professor and vice chair in Marquette University's Department of Computer Science and director of the Center for Data Ethics and Society. His research addresses the social and ethical implications of digital technologies, such as AI, pervasive data practices, and internet surveillance, with projects including Pervade and the widely referenced Zuckerberg Files archive. So thank you for being here. You do a lot, and we have lots of questions for you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks, Caroline.
Thank you for being here. So, okay, so let's start beginning with the broadly question. So what is data ethics, and why should an average person care about it in their daily life?
The sort of trajectory of data ethics is interesting. Like most everything happening in sort of the data space right now, there's been a long history of people in computing concerned about ethics and social impacts, and there's been computer ethics and a wide range of disciplines over the years. But I think in the last 5 or 10 years, this explosion in the access to big data,
Mm,
the increased amount of tracking and data collection that's happening that we're perhaps aware of, perhaps not aware of in both online environments and now just our digital lives. There's been an increased focus on how we make sure that we're doing the data collection, the data processing, the tools that we're
mm,
building in ways that are ethically informed. And so data ethics has emerged as a space that engages with all of that. So some people are thinking about just data privacy.
mhm,
Others are thinking about like research ethics. Is it okay for researchers to collect data from Reddit posts or YouTube videos? And then now
mm,
there's the whole AI space. And so, we cover a lot of different terrain. That's what makes my job so fun, is because every
mhm.
week I get to see what's going to be the issue now, and we try to
Yeah.
pivot and cover it. I mean, it's like what you deal with just with any kind of internet studies. It's an ever growing space.
Yes.
Um, I think what's been interesting lately is that there's been a lot more focus on this. It's
Mm,
not so much just, us, we used to be like the privacy wackos in the corner of the room complaining about things. And now I think there's much more public awareness and concern. And also even within industry, there's growing awareness and attempts to address some of these broad sets of issues.
Can you tell us what pervasive data is and how it's different from data that people intentionally leave
mm,
online?
Yeah, pervasive data is a term that some colleagues and I came up with when we launched the Pervade project,
mm,
pervasive data ethics for computational researchers. And we were trying to find a way to describe big data, but big data about people and
mm,
data that's a little bit different in the sense, there's always been big data. There's been logs of transactions by credit card companies, and there's been, lots of data collected about where the toll booths my car goes through. There's all kinds of big data sets out there, all with their own concerns. But we started to get more focused on the fact that people may not realize that their phone is collecting data about location and about fitness and about activities and who they're next to and all kinds of data sources and data collection methods that just are in the background that maybe you agreed to because you clicked some button, some box
yeah.
20 years ago when you signed up for Instagram. But it's that kind of data that's increasingly being used by industry, by researchers, by law enforcement, by all kinds of agencies, and actors. And so we were trying to think of a way to focus on that unique aspect of big data that's about people. It's about different parts of their lives all coming together, and collected, like you mentioned, Seth, in ways that many people just may not recognize as happening. It's not always done for bad purposes, but it's often concern there that we want to focus on. So that's what we're thinking about when we talk about pervasive data.
Mm. I mean, how much is out there really, like for me, let's just say on my iPhone or whatever. Do people can they actually get a lot of information about me?
Yes. I
Yeah.
think it's, especially with the rise of, what we used to call ubiquitous computing, the fact, or Internet of Things. We have so many devices, so many tools that we get benefit from, like using navigation in your car. If you pull up Apple Maps or Waze or something, we get a lot of benefit out of that, but there's a lot of data collection on the back end. I mean, one thing I often do is I have my students open their phones and open up the health app and see how much data is there about their health and well-being. And it might be sleep tracking, it might be their steps that they're walking, it might be heart rate. They may not even own an Apple Watch or anything, but this data is still being collected through
Yeah.
direct or indirect ways, and it just surprises them when they start looking at that.
How do you functionally create a dossier of Seth Camillo from all this random data I collect? It seems like it would be very hard to put that together, or is it fairly easy?
I think the companies that are incentivized to have that data have found ways to make that happen. We used to be
Mm.
concerned about third-party cookies. I wrote my dissertation back in the early 2000s, and we were worried about Google and DoubleClick and tracking online. And those are like baby steps compared to what's possible now. Sometimes it's the uniqueness of your phone's, MAC address or different kinds of components where a company like Target, who famously doesn't have like a frequent shopper, program, but they still know what each of us buys because they could track our credit card number attached to our receipts. They can actually potentially know your phone. They may not know it's Seth Camilo's phone, but they know it's a phone with this unique MAC address, like the network address of your phone, and they can see where that goes in the store and draw some connections and see where that phone goes through the
Wow.
checkout line. So, and I'm not trying to be like, conspiratorial, but it's just these are the means that the
Mm.
companies that have a benefit for collecting data have figured out how to do this. I think the emails and cell phone numbers that we use to log into your coffee shop account to get, some free points, or your grocery store or Best Buy, that's actually the most common way that data might be kind of commingled by large data brokers, just by a common email address.
Well, I just got a new phone and there were so many decisions to be made, and I know each one of them had a large impact on, my data, and, I was overwhelmed and just, sort of picked things that I'm sure made me, um, might be a dangerous choice in terms of my data being released.
I mean, that's pointing
Mm.
to this real tension between like utility and privacy. And
Yeah.
the tools are compelling and useful. And so we're often willing to either sacrifice or overlook or not investigate what might be the back end of that. Um, but I would hope that some of the work that we've done and people in my community over the years, now if you have like an iPhone, there's more prompting about just those things, about the kinds of data you're sharing. There's more reminders that, oh, by the way, you're sharing data with this app.
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to keep doing that? And those are all these little nudges that weren't there originally, but it was, part of pressure from advocates, from scholars,
Mhm.
a company like Apple who wants to, market the fact that they're a little more privacy protecting than others. So we've been slowly building better tools. The downside is that now it's all on you, to recognize those issues, to figure that out, and to make those decisions. And we've kind of offloaded all of that responsibility to the users. So it's hard to find the right kind of balance there.
Yeah, that's interesting because if I think about, as you said, tracking, I mean, yes, I get a new phone and blah, 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 but I honestly, I don't, I mean, I should, but go in the phone and start doing, oh, don't track this to track that. There's so many options if you start going
Yeah.
in, but no one really tells you anything of this, even when you're setting up.
Yeah.
Be at least to me. So as you said, this is kind of up to the consumers now, where we gotta to protect ourselves.
Yeah, this is often a criticism. I know like Facebook has been a great example of this where they view privacy as giving users control. And if you have control of your data, that's what they need to provide. That's how they ensure privacy. So now you have like the cockpit of a 747 with all these switches and settings,
Mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
and you don't know what
Yeah.
to set.
right.
But but Facebook would say, but we gave users control.
Yeah.
That's what they view as sufficient. So we end up with what some scholars call like privacy fatigue, where there's just
Yes.
too much. Or my data's out there already. I might as well just sign up for this one more card because
Yeah.
I don't have any control. And that's what a lot of us are trying to sort of push against and find better ways to resolve those problems. Maybe something like in the EU where they have different data protection rules, different obligations that companies have to provide around transparency or the ability to remove data after it's been collected. Those are different kinds of forms of protection that at least here in the US we haven't embraced. But there's other options or other models. Yeah.
Are there really data brokers that, for instance, if I was going in for an interview for a job, that the person sitting across from me would actually have information on me,
Hmm.
based on the, internet searches, etcetera?
Yeah, yeah. The easiest example of that are like the classic kind of background checks that you still even see online if you search for somebody's name. And now it's all you pay $15 and they're going to collect in the mass public records, social media data. But some of these are getting more robust. They're finding profile information. They're getting things like from your LinkedIn or your Instagram, or
Hmm.
trying to shape a version of what you are. The ability to go and collect more fine-tuned data about things like your purchase histories and things like that, they're less likely to get that specific, but they're probably able to figure out what kind of like category or what kind of bucket have you been put into by these companies. And it's like if you can go into your ad settings on YouTube or on Instagram and you can see that, oh, they put you in the categories that you like, public media, and you like the NFL, and you like, Chevy trucks. They figure out, what it
Hmm.
is that you like, and that's how advertisers market to you. So there's some like indirect ways that they might know a lot about you, even if they don't know the specifics about your life.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well, yeah. So even, I mean, I've heard a lot lately that people saying, because you mentioned LinkedIn, that people are saying, I'm applying to 50,000 jobs.
I mean, a lot of what's happening in job search is the role of AI, and
Yeah.
it's attempts to automate and simplify those processes. I can't imagine. We have like one of those Amazon warehouses near us in Milwaukee, and they must be getting thousands of applications a day, to fill those jobs, and you can't have a person look at all those. So there's always, attempts to try to automate that. So I know with job seeking, or when our students go out, a lot of the first, the submission of resumes might be going through some kind of automated screening where they're looking for certain words or the absence of words or whatever it might be. But those first interviews are increasingly now done through AI in an automated means. Well, they'll ask applicants to join an online video session. There'll be a set of questions. They record themselves answering those questions. There's no person on the other end, and that gets uploaded. And then there are companies who now apply machine learning or AI tools and assess those uploads. Not only did they answer the question well or not, but they're doing like assessments of people's presence. Are they
Oh,
personable?
wow.
Are they smiling? And maybe for some jobs that's appropriate. For many jobs, that's probably not inappropriate. And then you have all the failures of AI and face recognition that go on for that, and that's increasingly what happens. So I show that to my students, they have just the same reaction. Like, they just
That's
Oh,
start
amazing.
imagining, how how frustrating that must be for someone that maybe isn't comfortable with a camera or,
Yeah.
might be nervous. And if we're having a one-to-one conversation, I could explain to you, well, I just got into a fender bender in the parking lot, and that's why I'm all nervous and anxious. But if I'm just talking to a camera, you don't have that kind of interaction. So a lot of the seeking is being automated. So now we have all the concerns about biases in AI and how it's training and how it recognizes faces or not, or this quantification of us, through
Yeah.
these tools that just, they're trying to solve a problem, and I think they're creating some new problems.
Wow.
How effective do you think the laws like the GDPR in Europe and the CCPA in California are at protecting online users? And what regulations would you like to see put in place?
I
Mm.
mean, the benefit of these kinds of laws, even though they're very specific in the regions that they apply to, especially something like the CCPA in California, is that they will kind of benefit everyone in the United States because Instagram's not going to create a separate
Yeah.
app and policy just for
Right.
California. It's going to help us all. So, like Illinois has a really strong biometric law as well, that you can't use people's biometric data without permission. You can't collect it without permission. And there's been some big benefits for the whole
Mm.
country because Illinois has specific laws in place as well. So, in some ways, there are, um, I think, some indirect ways that companies have to address, what these laws require. Even the California law is not perfect. I know the big tech firms,
What would you
have.
like to see? What would you like to see?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge we have right now is that we're still stuck in what lawyers call the notice and consent, regime. That if we have a terms of service on our website and you click OK, therefore all is good. And it's ignoring the
Yeah.
fact that people don't read those. That when I clicked OK, when I created my account as a 16-year-old is different than when I'm 26 or I'm 36, but I'm using the same account, but my life has changed. Maybe the platform has changed,
Mm.
and that's part of the model that I think needs to shift. I think the good thing that the European rules tend to have is it's a more focus. Not just did the user agree to something, but you as the provider have a responsibility and have a duty
Ah.
to respect them, to respect their autonomy, and it's more about their obligation, as a custodian of that data to be good, and to be thoughtful about that. It's just a very different thing than in the US. We're very let the market, let industry innovate, and we'll figure out, a small fix if there's a small problem. And we're less likely to have that kind of top down regulation. I think some of the biggest problems right now is around like the use of face recognition and the
Mm.
collection, especially of visual data in public. And that's been a real
No,
challenge in the
yeah.
US about how do we do with public spaces. And it's been pretty much just collect whatever you want to and do whatever you want with that. Because if I'm in public, the argument is I don't have an expectation of privacy.
Yeah.
And I think we need to shift our thinking there a little bit to give people a little more autonomy, and the ability to sort of control what happens with their information.
Well, that's horrible. So you're saying if I'm in a public space and some kind of way there's some facial recognition, I'm not giving any consent just because I'm out that to use anything about me. Can I mean, is that actually what could happen?
Yeah, generally the law allows that. There might be some limitations on what they could do with that information, but and that's why that's part of the concern with the rise in doorbell cameras and all these cameras on our
Oh
cars,
yes,
all these
yes.
public spaces where we're collecting information. Again, often for reasons of security or safety, which might be valid reasons. But now what's happening with that data? I spent a lot of time also thinking about research ethics and what should researchers do and what's ethical for researchers. And there's been a lot of cases where large data sets of people have been collected to help train, machine learning systems to recognize faces, to recognize the difference between somebody walking or somebody running or somebody,
Mhm.
joking around or somebody fighting so they can have automated systems. And a lot of these data sets are from cameras in public places where they've just captured all this data of people walking by, like on college campuses. There's a couple of those. And it's very controversial whether or not it's actually ethical to use that data. You're not trying to like do anything to that person, but you're using that person's presence, to
Mm.
help train a model, and that creates ethical dilemmas about what's appropriate.
You can't be championing privacy and then also using those data sets. It's in contradiction.
Right. And one of the challenges that I have, I'm in a department of computer scientists. I'm not a computer scientist by training. I'm trained in social methods and thinking about technology and society and ethics. And a lot of my computer science colleagues just aren't used to dealing with humans in their research. They're just used to dealing
Mm.
with data. That's how they were trained. But now that data is from your online activity or something about, you as a person, and getting them to recognize that contradiction, Seth, is the hard part. That,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, or just blurring a face isn't necessarily enough to protect someone's identity or giving them respect or autonomy. So yeah,
I was gonna ask that about blurring the face, because if you, let's say, Google Map or Google Earth, you're going down on a street and you see it's it's the blurred face. I mean,
yeah.
you know.
In Europe, it is. In the US, it's not always. So, and that's again the difference between laws
Oh, it's
and
not?
where laws apply. I think in the US, they've gotten better at that now. I remember when Google, Street View first was launched, I was writing my dissertation about Google and privacy at the time, and the first thing I did was I found a Google Street View image. I was living in New York City of a Planned Parenthood, a women's health
No,
clinic,
oh my gosh.
and there was a picture of a person leaving, that building. Now, we have no
Oh.
idea why that person was in that building or not, but now all of a sudden, there's an image of this person, leaving a building, and now it's on, a Street View for all to see. So we end up with these really interesting consequences when you're building a tool like that, and
Yeah.
My
and what could
god.
happen downstream. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my god, you don't even think about this in everyday life, like,
yeah, yeah,
how actually that could be an horrible outcome for
yeah,
somebody. Wow.
Well, Caroline and I are both filmmakers, and we've had this discussion before already about, Anthropic or whoever, scraping
oh,
our movies, and I mean,
yeah,
it does seem to be this precarious balancing act on a high wire about personal privacy versus public good, and when I say public good, I mean in terms of the, quality of the products that we're able to have, like, I don't want you to take ChatGPT from me, you know?
right. I mean, these debates mirror some of the early privacy debates when Gmail was first launched, and it was amazing because it was all this storage and it was free. And then they were going to place ads, and they were reading the contents of the emails. And if your email
Mm.
was about an upcoming trip to Los Angeles, the ads would be flights and hotels
Yeah.
in Los Angeles.
Right.
And Google's defense was, well, there's no humans reading it. It's only our algorithms that are looking at it, as if
Mm.
that's what matters. And we see the same now issues around the scraping and collecting of data to train AI, where, they're not trying to, duplicate you. They just want to build on your ideas or something. Yeah, those are those arguments.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's what I love about my job is I get to sit and I'm teaching students in computer science and data science who are going to go build some of these systems, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that they understand these complexities and these challenges. And
Well, Anthropic has what 7 million class action suit against them. I guess they
yeah,
have settled, but nobody knows what the settlement says.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
but
yeah,
but by settling it all, they are acknowledging,
right,
at least that's the chatter. They're at least acknowledging there is something there that just rifling through everybody's book and using it does come with
Yeah.
consequences.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
also see companies like Reddit, or other platforms making their own deals,
Yes.
essentially like licensing their content, which suddenly makes the users of those platforms realize that they don't own,
Yep.
I might be sharing on Reddit every day, but I don't get to own or manage or determine what happens with what I share.
Yep.
Reddit can do that, and so again, I think it's maybe it's a silver lining that it's forcing people to sort of rethink the relationship with these platforms,
Mhm.
and maybe we get a shift in online users' rights or something. It's gonna be interesting to see how this all kind of shakes out. Yeah,
Yeah, now when they start having the age verification for children, or I guess for all of us now, more and more,
yeah,
that seems to be something that could be very also
yeah.
dangerous for
That's what.
privacy.
Yeah, that's one of those debates that you can understand the motivation,
Yeah.
but the implementation and the consequence just seems so harsh.
It's a little bit like the automobile. I care about the environment, but I also care about getting to work. And it's
Yeah,
eh,
yeah,
a duality, that can't be actually, um, rectified between those two ideas of wanting privacy, but also wanting to use tools, um, like ChatGPT. Um,
yeah. I think what we need to start leaning more towards is about giving users the right kinds of tools, the right kind of
Mm,
training, the right kind of options to make those informed decisions. So, like with your car, there's different ways you can solve that problem, and still get to work and still own a car and still be a responsible car owner and
yeah.
steward of the environment. And too often when we see these kinds of dilemmas online, we're just seeing these drastic kind of responses, like just age verification.
right.
If a community is concerned about something like pornography or speech online, just forcing people to prove their age, I don't see how that's solving any of those problems,
No, true.
and just creating a bunch of new ones. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So how do you think AI have been changing the world of security? Like now.
Well, I know one of the things that my colleagues who study, or even my students going into security, they are seeing benefits of AI to help them understand threats and study a large scale system,
Okay.
and to try to understand some of those kinds of issues. But of course, it's an arms race. On the flip side, you have bad actors using AI to figure out ways to deal with physical security. I think the biggest worry that I have is about, like, social engineering, or this, someone sending you a phishing email, pretending to be your boss, getting you to click a link or hand over information. And those are getting more sophisticated because of generative AI, fake video deep fakes,
Yes.
where,
Mm,
I have elderly parents and I'm terrified that they're gonna get a phone call from an
yeah.
AI that's impersonating one of our voices and getting them to, you know, get access to a bank account.
Yeah.
And they're just
Yeah.
not able to pick up those differences. And I think, we've seen a few examples of that in commerce, where there was some video call and someone impersonated the CFO and got some accountant to change the bank accounts or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, that level of security is going to be the real concern about deep fakes. And this larger question about just, how do we ensure the authenticity of a message?
Right.
And that's coming quick and faster than anybody can imagine. I mean, I think
Yeah,
at the moment it's in the hands of people who are bad actors, but pretty soon it's gonna be available to everybody,
Yeah.
deepfakes
yeah,
and the, voice deepfake as well.
yeah.
I mean, I think right now you'd have to have some knowledge to do that, but pretty soon you're not going to need to have very
Well,
much
it's
knowledge to start doing
yeah,
it.
I think that time might be here. I mean, we
Yeah.
we see the high profile cases where suddenly Taylor Swift gets deep faked, and then
Oh, yes.
she can create, the right amount of pushback or the visible pushback. But there are apps that are available online for anybody to use, where you just submit a photo of person and it undresses them,
Ugh.
Terrible.
through AI. And we see those issues in schools and in harassment and inappropriate behavior. And again, I don't think banning the tools. I think we need to teach kids how to, you know, be appropriate with each other. And there's, well, it's a whole range of issues, I suppose there. But those things are out there, and it is causing a lot of challenges across generations and in different kinds of settings and environments.
Mm.
Well, I think what
And
you said is very impactful, actually, because I could say something very mean to you, but I'm not, right?
yeah,
So,
right,
you know,
right,
you have to learn how
right,
to
yeah,
use this amazing tool that
yeah,
we or set of tools that we have, and you need to regulate yourself. And
yeah,
I think that's an important message
Yeah.
that you just said. I think that's very important because I think there is that instinct to cut everything off, and that's not probably useful.
right. Yeah, I think that's not going to get you where you want to be, right? To just try to shut it down or turn it off. It is, and I think there's a lot of complicated factors that might be contributing to why people just aren't being having good relations with each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but these tools, the challenge right now is that there are so many tools that
Yeah.
just make it easier and easier to be a jerk, to put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We when we talk about the history of internet and society, those concerns about like cyberbullying were
Mhm.
often those examples where I was bullied on the schoolyard, but it stopped at the schoolyard. And once I was home,
Right.
like physically, I was separated, and I knew that was there. And of course, now with online communication and spaces, that's no longer the case. So now we're seeing that same kind of problem, whether it's deep fakes or other forms of harassing behavior. So
Yeah.
it's hard, it's,
Yeah, it is.
I think it's the theme of what you guys talk about. It's always hard, and
It
and,
is always
Yeah.
and we're trying to do what we can. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and as you said, like, bullying, I mean, when I grew up, at that was something that happened, and the teachers, they had discussions about it, and the
yeah,
poor kids or anyone who got bullied, and it was really, really, really bad. And but I can't even imagine how bad it is today.
yeah,
Where, as you
yeah.
said, uh, cyberbullying, and the poor child is not even safe at home,
Right, right.
because if you go online, there you go. What do you do? How can you, as you said, regulate? Maybe you can't even regulate. Like, how do you teach people to act like a decent human being? But
Yeah. I mean, that's I think the benefit of the work I do, be able to bring a lens of ethics,
Mhm.
and justice and fairness to this, where um, I don't want people to just turn it off.
Right.
I think you can only regulate it. I don't think you can only create a setting to flag on off some feature. I think it needs to be all these things together, and how to have human relations, and how to be a good person.
Well, we
You
all
know,
have cars, we don't run over people. I mean,
exactly.
there's
And
Right, right.
we have to
yeah,
learn how to use our tools
yeah,
in a
yeah.
way that's ethical,
And this
and I hopefully that'll happen. I mean, because these are amazing. They also have, we're talking about the negative, but they have amazing capabilities,
Right,
and we don't want to forget that or leave that behind simply because people can't behave themselves. That would be
right.
a shame. That would be a big shame.
Yeah, I think finding the right way to sort of create that whole package where people can find the ways to benefit, can figure out the right way um to have positive outcomes, to recognize the downsides, to mitigate that or manage
Right.
that. And it takes effort to do that. I feel lucky, at Marquette University, we're a Jesuit institution. Our students think about ethics and justice and fairness in what we do. So I could train our computer science and our engineers and our data scientists to have that kind of mindset. And I do think we see more of that in the tech industry. We're seeing more employees rising up and arguing with
Mm.
management about what's the appropriate, people for us to partner with or build or contract with or use our tools for. But we also see plenty of people in the industry who seem to not care about that. And
Yeah,
and and
yeah.
so there is that tension that's out there. And then, it's incentives. And I think a lot of times, this is one of the things I try to talk with our students about, is managing that balance. You're going to have a profit incentive, which is appropriate because you have companies, you have employees, you have shareholders. That's fine.
True.
But you also have this social and society incentive and responsibility and finding the right balance,
Well,
to make those things work.
with that being
Right.
said, maybe it's good to pivot as we're talking about ethics and incentive, profit incentive, to take a turn to the Zuckerberg files,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what is your goal with the Zuckerberg files? And I think it's
So
related to what we're talking about now.
that's a great question to
Yeah.
to to ask of me. The intent was to write a paper about how Mark Zuckerberg talks about privacy,
Mhm.
and this was probably back in 2010 or something. I was thinking about that, and I remember that I was at a meeting with other privacy advocates. I happened to be at Facebook with some Facebook policy people, and they would never. We were talking about privacy. It was a privacy meeting, but the Facebook people never said privacy. They always said user control or user autonomy or things like that. Like some memo went around to say, here's the language we should use when
Mhm.
Oh.
we're talking about privacy. So that got me thinking about, okay, so how does Zuckerberg think about this and how does he talk about these things? And so as I started looking at some of his blog posts and speeches at the time, I realized there's actually kind of a whole story here just about how he views the platform, the goal, the purpose, what it's doing for society. And I started just collecting this and I started just creating this archive. And I got a couple of colleagues and students to help me put together this collection of everything that he's ever said in public. And now it's turned into this never ending collection. We have a few thousand different records now.
Wow.
Um, we have full text of every Facebook post, Instagram post, that he's done, every interview he's done, every podcast, every speech, every product, announcement, everything that he's ever done. We have either the transcript or also maybe the video of that captured. So now you can look over time and see both how has he just grown as a person because you know, he was a kid when all this started,
Yeah.
and has that affected him? We could see how he talks about what's the goal of the company and what's their, how are they doing with problems and where are they trying to do forward. You can sort of see how rhetoric might change over time,
Mm.
how he responds to controversies. And we're tracking even just his wardrobe because it's kind of interesting for a big
Yeah.
stretch there. He just
Yeah,
wore the
yeah.
same outfit, the same gray t-shirt or a
Yep.
hoodie. Um,
Woo.
and,
That's true.
Zuckerberg is so interesting because, he's one of the few now, he might be the only one now of these large tech companies where he was the founder and he still runs it, more than a decade later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he's been consistent that way. And he has a unique structure at, well, now Meta, where the board can't fire him. He's very much in charge and whatever he thinks is what happens. And so the way he thinks about the world or the way he thinks about privacy or the way he thinks about free speech, it really matters in terms of how those platforms get developed. And when he's got that many billions of users using those platforms,
Yeah.
kind of his worldview, I think, is important for us to understand.
What do you think the number one
Mm.
um idea that you would sort of have from having put this together? What would you pull from it?
I think I think one of the core themes is that he still is oddly naive about what the role of his company in society and technology in society. And part of me originally was just thinking, well, he had sort of this engineering mentality, dropped out of college, became a billionaire in a hurry,
Mhm.
never had to really struggle or deal with things a lot of people in the world have to deal with. But even when he sees everything that could possibly go wrong when you have a platform like his, whether it's misinformation or election interference or harassment or the impact on young people, he still just thinks if we just tweak it the right way, we'll solve those problems.
Mhm.
It's a very sort of technological determinist approach that if we perfect the technology in a platform, we'll fix those problems without really recognizing that maybe it is the existence of the platform
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fundamental to the challenge here. And so I think that's still the one takeaway. And very rarely does he ever get like corrected. Like there's not much countering
Mhm.
his view. And really only one of the few times is like when he announced the metaverse, if you remember that, because now it's no longer really that important.
No.
But that was gonna be this huge transition, and that didn't work. And that's one of the few failures where something that he was pushing for just didn't really happen. But otherwise, he's had so much success. I think he feels this kind of "I must be right" kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think
Well, it
it's
actually would be pretty hard, to keep
yeah,
your ego in check given that I isn't it 4 billion people are
yeah,
on
yeah,
Facebook and 3 billion
Yeah.
are daily users, and
yeah,
what's 4 billion? I mean, that's essentially how what percent of internet connected people is that? It's
right.
probably in the
Not
ninety
yeah,
percent,
exactly,
and
exactly,
so it
yeah,
Yeah.
probably is pretty hard to have humility under those
yeah.
circumstances.
And
Yeah.
it seems
Yeah.
different than, um, the arrogance that someone like Elon Musk, I think,
Mhm.
exhibits. I don't think it's I think Zuck just feels he's right, and, he's been able to invest and spend and get what he needs, without much resistance. But now it's changing a little bit. So this is gonna be an interesting time to see what happens both with his company, and just how other people are reacting. And there's not many people left on the planet that aren't that aren't in his servers. So
Yeah.
this pivot towards hardware, and some of the other things he's doing, we'll see what happens there. Yeah.
Well, talking about, ethics and, speech, you, the face the Facebook papers, right? You
Yeah.
advise
Yeah.
Gizmodo
Yeah.
on how to release, not release. I mean, what were your feelings? So just to background, right?
Sure.
It was a whistleblower
Yep.
brought Gizmodo some papers with stuff that's not flattering of Facebook, let's say that, right?
Yeah. So Francis Haugen was the former employee who took photos and screenshots of internal documents and internal discussion threads.
Mm.
A lot of it around the impact of the platform, whether it was Facebook or Instagram, in different kinds of communities. So impact on young women, it had issues around human trafficking, it had issues around hate speech, around misinformation, around
Mm.
politics. And so there was a large number of documents, hundreds and hundreds of documents that were made available to a number of different news agencies. And Gizmodo wanted to find a way to responsibly release those. And so I was part of a group who helped them go through all these documents and mostly to figure out where was it appropriate to redact information. There may have been an employee's name who wasn't like a public figure or wasn't like germane to the critique, and we wanted to protect that employee, just because they happen to be part of a discussion, but there's no reason to out their actual identity. And then there were also some examples of perhaps like internal security measures.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to like hand bad actors, like a roadmap on how to, compromise their systems. But by and large, the vast majority of the information was just put out there, and even if it was embarrassing or problematic for Facebook, and um, it was quite an eye opening experience to see those internal dialogues that were
Mm,
happening at the company. There was a lot of really talented people doing research internally on how is the platform being used, what happens if we make this change to a setting, what can we predict might be happening in the world, and they would run a lot of research internally on those issues.
Maybe we're coming to the end of things, and I would say we have a question for you to
Yeah.
end things. After years of studying pervasive data, online ethics, and platforms like Facebook, what do you think are the strongest lessons? What has sort of been ingrained inside you? What do you feel you've
mm,
learned that you didn't know before and might have surprised you?
I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons to take from all of this work is understanding not just unintended consequences of how we design and deploy tools like this and digital tools, but also vulnerable and underrepresented communities.
mm,
And we could study the heck out of something, but if we're not understanding how one particular community might be interacting with that, that might be all the difference between whether or not something is ethical or not.
Could you
And
expand on that a
yeah,
little bit? What does that
yeah.
mean exactly?
I
Because
mean,
that's
in some ways, it might be, if we think about a company that might be testing a product before they deploy it out in the world, and it works for 80% or 90% of the people that they tested it with. And from a business standpoint, that sounds great. Let's put it out there. We could deal with a 10% failure rate or something like that. And
Mm,
from a business marketing plan and all that, that's fine. But that 10% of people might be a particularly vulnerable community or a community that's already been underserved or harmed, and now we're just making life even more difficult, and we're not serving that community. And that's the challenge I think that I've noticed is
mm,
trying to get designers, the business leaders, even the regulators to recognize that, we may not be able to solve the problem for everyone, but we need to at least recognize that all those different kinds of communities, those different kind of impacts matter, and we need to try to do what we can to mitigate that or to minimize that.
well, even like ChatGPT, I mean, things that a middle class person like myself thinks like, oh, $20 a month, that's like an amazing
Right.
deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But $20
Yeah.
a month for somebody who's in a different socio-economic position is maybe too much money, and I gain more of
Yeah.
an advantage.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so again, it's recognizing these unintended consequences, thinking beyond,
Mm,
just that, you know, those whatever your metrics are to build and deploy something, but thinking about those broader impacts. That's our goal. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. And it's very important, obviously,
Yes.
you know. Well, I want to thank you for coming and talking to us. We want to thank you.
Yes.
too.
No, thanks for the conversation, and watching other episodes and other people have on. Just keep up this great work. It's good to have these conversations.
Oh,
So
well, thank you. That's
Oh,
very nice
thank
yeah,
you. I
of you to say.
really,
yeah.
That's
yeah, I
very,
really appreciate
very,
it.
very nice of you to say. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Appreciate it.
right. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching or listening to The Internet is Crack. Tune in next week when we have another great conversation about robotics, AI, and the internet. You can watch us or listen to us on YouTube or Spotify or many other outlets. And don't forget to follow us on social media. See you next Monday.